Hey everybody, this is Jack Moffett with Black Fox Productions with another vlog, and today we're going to be talking about which camera you should buy as a beginner video camera. There are a lot of brands out there and it's very hard to sort through and decide which one. So hopefully these tips can help you decide which one you want to buy. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Tip number one on this is to do your research on the camera that you are thinking of buying. So there are so many models out there. There's so many different grades of cameras that go ahead and do some Googling on which model you're thinking of buying. Look at the specs, what resolution does it shoot in, battery life. These are things that you want to consider before you actually buy the camera. And there's a lot of video test footage on the internet that was likely shot by another videographer or filmmaker using the same camera. And you can find that all over YouTube. So go ahead and do your research on the grade of the camera that you're thinking about. For example, if you are a wedding videographer, that's going to put you in a price range of DSLRs that might be different from, say, if you're shooting a feature film. It depends on how you want to use the camera. So you want to do the research on the camera beforehand. And you'll find reviews on the internet all about it, and that's a great place to start. Tip number two is to think about where you want your videos to be seen. So this is probably the most important question you need to ask before you decide on which camera you want. Because if you're wanting your videos to be seen on Netflix, then there's a class of cameras that they require you to shoot on that they will only accept if you shot on those cameras. If you're like most videographers and you just want your videos to be seen online, social media platforms such as YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, things like that, like I do, then you'll probably want to go with the DSLRs, which are a perfect blend of affordable and compact. But you want to decide where you want your videos to primarily be seen and what distribution channel. And for most people nowadays, that is online. So think about that and then base it on the class of the camera that you're thinking about, and then go from there. Because if you're planning to shoot a feature film, you may want to consider going up to the higher grades, such as on a Red, for example, just because there's a certain quality associated with a feature film. However, there are exceptions where certain movies were shot completely on phones. So just think about where you want your video or your film to be seen and then base it on that class from there. The next question that you want to ask yourself is, what's your budget? This is the primary question that most starting videographers have for themselves, and that's perfectly normal. If you can't afford a camera just yet, that's fine. A lot of people will start shooting on very, very cheap cameras. They'll shoot on their phones. That's perfectly fine when you're starting out. There's no shame in that. So what you want to do is you want to go with the camera that you can afford. And you would actually be surprised at the video quality that you can get out of a video camera if you light it correctly. You can make a $500 video camera look like it was shot on something that costs 10 times as much if you light it. There's so much more to production value than the value of the camera that you have. And yes, I'm sure that there are different resolutions for each camera. If you're shooting on something like the Red, obviously it's going to look a little bit different than on a Canon Rebel T2i, for example. But if you light your videos correctly, you're going to get so much more value out of the video, and no one is going to be able to tell that you shot on a cheaper camera. So don't let that worry you if you can't afford a very expensive camera yet. There is so much more to videography than the value of the camera you've got. Don't worry about that. Nobody starts out shooting on a red Komodo or something like that on their first go. No one does that. The very first project that I shot on was actually shot on a Sony Handycam. It shot to videotapes. So there's no shame, just go with what you can afford. And then as you get more experienced and you get more clients, then you can upgrade your camera as you go and as the years go by. Another consideration is how mobile would you like to be with the physical camera? This is one of the more minor considerations that you might want to think about when you're factoring in exactly which camera to buy. But considering how heavy the actual camera body is important, because if you're a wedding videographer and you're going to be lugging the camera around all day long, then you need to take into consideration how much the camera weighs, because you do not want to be lugging around a gigantic Arri Alexa for a wedding. And I mean, that I assume that most people wouldn't do that, but you want to take that into consideration about how mobile you want to be with your equipment. Because if you're a run and gun videographer, obviously the DSLRs are probably your go-to. I myself use a Panasonic GH5, which I've written about a lot on my blogs, but you want to take that into consideration. Because if you've got a heavy camera on your gimbal and you're moving around all day long shooting, then your arms are going to be absolutely spent. You also have to consider the payload weight limit on the actual gimbal. That's another consideration, because if you put something like a fully loaded Arri Alexa on a Ronin RS2, then you're going to destroy the motors. Sounds obvious, but something that you want to consider when you're actually buying your starter camera. Next tip is to consider renting the camera first before you actually buy it. There are a lot of websites on the internet where you can rent the camera with a lens for just a few days very cheaply. I know that Aperture Rent here in Atlanta does that. So it's a very affordable option for you to test out the camera before you actually buy it. And there are a lot of advantages to that. You can shoot some test footage with it. You don't have to worry about actually buying the camera yet. And you'll kind of get some of the nuances with the actual camera based on the settings, because each camera is a little bit different, especially in the menu settings. Then each brand kind of has its own menu, and you have to navigate through there and get a little bit used to it, and you will be ahead in that regard. Whenever you actually buy the camera, you'll be that much more used to it, and you'll go, oh, well, I've already shot with this camera before, and I'm that much more comfortable. So that's a perfectly reasonable option before you actually buy the camera. The last tip is to seek out professional advice from professional filmmakers that have used the camera. I do this all the time with the cameras that I'm going to think of buying. And you can look at reviews on the internet that they've posted that have posted their pros and cons about the camera, so that you can go ahead and see what's good and bad about the camera you're thinking of buying. They've already done the hard work for you. You might as well watch a review of what they think about the camera. They typically will post test footage of the camera. And I do that all the time. I'll see what other filmmakers have shot with the camera just to see what the camera is made of. So that's a very good option when you're thinking about the camera. Just go ahead and do some Googling, get on YouTube, and look at test footage that they have shot. It's a very reasonable option. I do it all the time. So that's my last piece of advice. And that concludes our vlog for this time. And next time I'm going to post a vlog that goes through the specifics of which cameras that I think are best for video if you're starting out as a videographer. Okay, so that'll do it for this vlog, and we'll see you on the next one.